Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon to those of you who are out here with me on the West Coast. My name's Tyler Hagenbuck, and on behalf of myself and my organization, Vote.org, I want to welcome everybody to our session tonight, which is Your Voice Matters, Understanding the Power and Importance of Voting. We are just 34 days away from Election Day, which means it's perfect timing for my two amazing panelists, Eliana and Samad and I, to share some insights and some motivations about what it means to be a voter, about how you can get more involved in voting and empowering others to vote in your schools and in your communities. I'd like to start by introducing myself, though, and telling you a little bit about my own story. I'm an election law lawyer. Over the last 15 years, I've had the great fortune of being a lawyer for some of the country's most well-known politicians, biggest companies, and leading nonprofit organizations, all around how those organizations interact with voters and try to get people out to vote. Over that time, I've learned a lot about the rules around voting, voter registration, elections, and I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to be here with you today to share some of that information. I currently work with Vote.org, which I'll tell you about later, and everyone from Vote.org passes along their best wishes to you as well. I certainly haven't always been an election law lawyer. I haven't always lived in California. In fact, I grew up in the rural Midwest, and I want to start my remarks tonight by taking you back to the Midwest with me, to the date January 3rd, 2008. So it was January 3rd, 2008, and it was freezing. I was in Sioux City, Iowa, and it was the night of the Iowa presidential caucus. I was driving alone in my car, and out of nowhere, I just started sobbing, like just absolutely weeping. And I wasn't sure why at the time. Nothing bad had happened at the moment. I hadn't gotten in a fight with somebody I loved. I hadn't received any bad news. I was just driving alone in my car in Sioux City, Iowa, and started crying. Now looking back at it more than 15 years later, I know exactly why I was crying. And it was because at that moment, the most profound political and voting related experience of my life was coming to an end. And I want to be clear, I've had some pretty profound political and voting related experiences. I've met with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. I've flown on private jets with some of the country's wealthiest and most powerful donors. But the 2 weeks that I spent in the freezing cold in a small town in Iowa, going door to door to door, talking to voters and asking them to go out and vote for my preferred candidate for president was the most meaningful political experience of my life. And as those 2 weeks were coming to a close that night, driving in my car, the emotion of what it meant to be a voter in this country, the emotion of what it means to talk to other people about their right to vote, the emotion of having done that day in and day out in the freezing cold for 2 weeks in a row leading up to the Iowa caucus that night, it just all caught up to me and overwhelmed me with pride and joy and emotion. And so what I hope for all of you participating here tonight and listening to this recording later, feel some sense of pride and empowerment and joy that your participation as a voter really does mean something. Because it's not always easy to be a voter. It's not always easy to be a champion of voting, somebody who's unafraid to go out and talk with their friends and their family and their community about exercising your right to vote. It is not always easy. In fact, for a long time, unless you happen to be born with the privileges of somebody who looked like me, it wasn't even legal to be a voter in this country, right? This November, in 34 days, it's going to be the 47th time that the people of the United States have voted for president. The first time we voted for president, only white men who owned property were allowed to vote. Since then, anyone who didn't look like a white male who owned property, like me, has had to fight to earn their right to vote, and they've had to fight to keep their right to vote. So each and every one of you who votes and who speaks up about voting is courageous. Each and every one of you who has to hold on to that courage, even when it's hard, and you've got to spread that courage. I'm here to tell you that a lot of people have your back. A lot of people out there want you to succeed. And there are a lot of resources available to help make sure you succeed, to make sure you have everything you need to register to vote and to cast a ballot. So what I thought I would do with my time with you tonight is to give you some information about what the people at my organization at vote.org are hearing from voters all across the country leading up to this election, some practical tips about how to get prepared to vote. I want to talk to you about where we are in the election calendar, what's going on with voter registration deadlines, what's going on with early voting right now. And at the very end, I'm just going to share my screen real quick to tell you about the tools and resources that vote.org has. So if it's helpful to you, you can make use of those resources as you get out there and you exercise your courage and you talk to other people about the right to vote and how they can get out there and vote. So I keep saying vote.org, vote.org, vote.org. What in the world, right? Vote.org is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that uses technology to try to make it as easy as possible to become politically engaged and get out to vote. It's a website that works in all 50 states plus DC, and it works in every election, not just this year's presidential election. That said, we do try to focus our outreach on young people and on voters of color, but across the board, it's the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan voter registration technology platform in America. We register more voters than anybody else in the country. I'll share some more information and resources about exactly what the website looks like and how you can navigate it. But what I want you to know is just how trusted it's become and how sort of broad the reach is. We have a bunch of partnerships with a bunch of other companies and a bunch of celebrities and corporations and things like that, right? So if you've registered to vote through Snapchat, you actually are registering to vote through vote.org's technology. If you register to vote through any of the NBA team websites, you're actually registering to vote through vote.org's technology. So given that broad reach, we talk to a ton of voters and we get a bunch of information. And so what I want to do is share with you the biggest myth that we hear about voting from the voters that we talk to, the biggest question that we get about voting, and the biggest tip that we have for voters going into this election season. So the biggest myth about voting, and people say myth, the biggest lie, this is a lie. The biggest lie about voting is that your vote doesn't matter, because it does. Your vote matters. Let's start with the presidential election. Hundreds of millions of Americans are going to vote in the presidential election, but the race could be decided by fewer people than attend a concert or a baseball game, right? It could be a really close race, and your vote absolutely matters. But there is so much more on the ballot than the presidential election. When somebody asks me why they should vote, I ask them, what issues do you care about? What's most important to you? What impacts your family or your community or your neighbors? Because whatever that issue is at the city level or the state level or the national level, voting is your tool to create the country that you want to live in. When you vote, you get a say in the issues that affect your life, whether it's the resources that are allocated to your school, whether it's public transit in the city that you want to live in, whether it's investments in your community. Get educated about the races that are happening all up and down the ballot. The races down the ballot, those local races, they can be really close. What was it? There's a statistic in 2021 in Ohio, 1 year, one state, in 2021 in Ohio, 18 races ended in a tie. Tell me your vote doesn't matter. It does. The biggest question or the biggest misconception that we get about voting, one of the most frequent things I hear, is that voters aren't realizing that their registration doesn't automatically update with them when they move. So if you just got to high school, or if you just got to college, you're a freshman in college, if you had registered in high school and you want to vote from campus now that you're in college, you've got to update that registration with your campus address if that's where you're going to be a resident and vote. If your family just moved because if your parents got transferred for work reasons, you got to make sure they update their voter registration address to the new location. Because if you moved to a new county or a new state, that registration is not automatically updating with you when you move. It's really, really easy to check your registration at vote.org. It takes about 30 seconds just to check to see if you're registered at your current address. But the biggest question I get is, does my registration automatically update with me when I move? And I'll back up a second because I think everybody knows this, but just in case, and it's not a big deal if you didn't know this already, but because it's not like this in every country, but in this country, you got to sign up to vote before you're allowed to vote. And we call it voter registration, right? So you got to sign up to vote before you're allowed to vote, and you got to be signed up at your current address. So make sure you check your registration, make sure you're registered to vote at your current address, especially if you've moved recently, especially if you've moved since the last time you voted. Now, what's our number one tip for the people this election? You got to make a plan and you can't wait to the last minute. We are getting real close to the last minute. Make a plan to vote. Don't let it wait. Let me talk about where we are in the election calendar and how you can make a plan. If you've been paying attention, if you are on this Zoom and you're kind of a political junkie, it maybe seems like the election has been going on forever and ever and ever. If you haven't been paying attention, it's time to start because you're about to miss it. We are 34 days away. But the 34 days can be misleading because, as I said, you got to get registered. And these registration deadlines can be different in every state. I'm going to say it again. The deadline to get registered to vote can be different in every state. In fact, the first round of voter registration deadlines is coming right up on Sunday and Monday. Like this coming Sunday and Monday, some big states, including Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Texas, and a half dozen others, it is the deadline to register to vote for this coming November's election. Use it or lose it, guys. You got to get registered to vote in those big states and some others by Monday. Other states have deadlines all throughout the month of October. Some states you can register all the way up through election day. This is why I say make a plan. You've got to know the rules for your state. And you can find those rules by going to vote.org. You can find those rules by going to your state's official election website. You're in Illinois, just Google Illinois elections or Illinois voter registration deadline. You'll find it right away. Go to vote.org, go to the Illinois page on vote.org. You'll find it right away. Now, remember I said there's 34 days until the election and 34 days that can be misleading. The other reason it can be misleading is because you don't necessarily need to wait 34 days to vote. This is the good part, right? Almost every state offers some way to vote other than waiting all the way until election day. Most states, many states, allow you to vote from home by getting a ballot in the mail. We love getting mail, right? Yes, we love getting mail, especially when it's not a tuition bill. We love getting mail. You can request a ballot. They'll send it to you in the mail. You fill it out at home, and you can either send it back in the mail or drop it off in person. Most states allow that. You just have to figure out if you're eligible to get a mail ballot in your state. Make a plan, do your research. A lot of states have in-person voting available before election day. Some states that's happening right now. Some states, they do it a couple weekends before election day. In-person voting open before election day. Remember, the key is just to do your research and make a plan to vote. Don't wait. If you make a plan, you don't have to worry about something coming up last minute. You get COVID last minute, don't have to worry about it because you made a plan to vote. You already had your mail ballot, you already sent it in, you're good to go. There's an extra, test you had to study for that you didn't know was coming up. And so don't have to worry about that because you already made a plan to vote. Extra shift at work, don't have to worry about that. You already made a plan to vote. Long line on election day, don't have to worry about that. Already made a plan to vote. Make a plan to vote, know the rules in your state, tell the people in your family to make a plan to vote. Tell people in your church, make a plan to vote. Tell people in your dorm, make a plan to vote. Your voice matters. Their voice matters. What you are doing is courageous. Last thing I'm going to do is make an old person's attempt to share my screen and show you what it looks like when an old person makes slides, because y'all, I went to school before they taught PowerPoint. And I'm just going to show you what some of this stuff at vote.org looks like. So when you go to our website, you can get a little bit of an idea of what you'll find, okay? Maybe. First thing you do, vote.org, all of our links are right here. Check your registration, register to vote, vote by mail, which is where you can request to get that ballot, which is not a tuition bill, in the mail, and see what's on your ballot. Let's say you chose register to vote. It just pops up a screen like this. Basically, what our website does is make it as easy as possible in your state for whatever the rules are in your state, right? In some states, 43 or 44 states, you can register to vote online. So what I do is I fill out my information here in LA, and it tells me right here, how would you like to submit your registration? Because online registration is available in California if I've got a driver's license or a state ID. So all I need to do was the recommended option of registering to vote online. So vote.org makes this as easy as possible to register to vote, to check your registration. It's just going to pop me over to my Secretary of State's website, get registered online right away. Could not be easier. It takes about 2 minutes, right? Super easy. So I'm going to go back real quick just so you can see. No matter what state you're in, this is what it's going to look like. The vote.org form figures out what state you're in, figures out what the options are in your state. Can you register to vote online, or do you need to submit a paper form? It'll tell you what your options are. If you can register to vote online in your state, it's just going to take you to that state webpage. Takes you a couple minutes there, you're good to go. What the other options we have, request your mail ballot, and my favorite one, see what's on your ballot. This is where you can really educate yourself. If you go to see what's on your ballot, put in the information for your address where you're registered, it'll pop up and show you all of the races on the ballot for this election. Some states are still finalizing their ballots and getting all the races set, so you might not see everything yet, but by the time you get your ballot and are ready to vote, you can do all your research, see all the candidates, see what party they're in, and click out to their websites so you can do your research that way. You can even choose which candidate you think you want to vote for and get your choices emailed to you. This is all about making it as simple, easy, straightforward as possible to vote. All of these resources available to you. Now, when I was talking about making a plan to vote, I also said, you need to know your registration deadlines. You need to know if you can vote by mail. You need to know if there's early voting in your state. We've got all of that on vote.org as well. Just go to the main vote.org page and scroll towards the bottom. We've got links for every single state. Choose Illinois because that's where I grew up. And you'll see Illinois voter registration deadlines, whether Illinois has election day registration, all the voter ID rules you need, literally every single thing you could want all on one page. And so if you're going around in your community, if you're going around in your dorm, this is going to have everything that you'll need all in one place to educate yourself, educate your community, educate your peers, everything you need. That's the information I wanted to share with you guys. I'm going to kick it to Eliana because her presentation is way better than mine. There is a Q&A box where you've got time for all three of the panelists to answer questions at the end. So I'm happy to answer questions about vote.org, about my own career, about this election, anything you guys want to talk about at the end. We've got 20 or so minutes set aside. So I'll get to questions in the Q&A box at the end, but I'm going to get rid of my screen. I'm going to kick it over to Eliana.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Eliana Arriaga, and I'm here to talk to you about my voting initiatives that I completed in high school. However, currently I am a freshman at the University of Texas at Austin. So first, I want to talk about how I got inspired to start my voter registration campaign. Well, it all started from freshman year when I mindlessly joined speech and debate. I didn't think anything of it more than I just had an elective to fill. However, it became my passion to get involved with politics and government as I got to research so many different topics. Through speech and debate, I ended up finding my voice, confidence, and increasingly became interested in the world of politics and government. Later, I became qualified as a four-time national qualifier in speech and debate, and I also qualified in local tournaments as well, such as TFA State and UIL. It also gave me the confidence to further pursue going into and getting accepted into the National Hispanic Institute, which I was then elected the Supreme Court Chief Justice. From there, I was also, through my dedication, elected speech and debate president my junior and senior year. However, my interest in politics and government that stemmed from my research abilities in speech and debate also led me to discover the numerous flaws and injustices in our government and how I can galvanize efforts to change them. So it started by blending my passions. Other than being a government major, I am also a dancer. And in high school, I was given the opportunity to have a solo at my school's spring show. And I decided to blend my two passions of dance and politics. I picked a song called Head Full of Doubt / Road Full of Promise, which was a song that reflected how society is being constantly blasted with so much media, being inundated with political views from every direction. But hidden within this wave of information hides a path for a better future. And through this, I entered my video later in the youth contest of the Bexar County League of Women Voters, where I received the second place finalist in that contest. So from here, I would just encourage anybody listening to bring your passions together and find ways to have your passions make an impact in your community and others in beneficial ways. After I choreographed this dance, I decided that I wanted to make an impact in other ways. And that's when I decided to start my voter initiative at my school once I was elected as an NHS officer at my school. I was charged with creating a subcommittee, which I then brought up the idea of creating a new subcommittee for voter registration initiatives, the first one done at my school. Through this, I began this conversation if this was even something that would be feasible. Because of the political climate of America, I wasn't even sure if this would be something that was accepted at my school. However, after talking with my NHS sponsor and with admin, it was something that they accepted and improved my idea. From there, I got involved locally, and I went to a local event hosted by the League of Women Voters in my hometown, where I got connected with the League of Women Voters former president, shown in the photo above, Madhu, who presented me with resources to start helping me with my voter registration initiatives. Since I wasn't 18 at the time, I wasn't able to become a VDR myself, so she provided me with support to have VDRs come to my campus with me and a few of my friends so we could help encourage my peers to register to vote. So you can see here. And it happened to be it was my first voter registration event, and it happened to fall on the National Voter Registration Day, which was really exciting. And so it was really important to me that I started this subcommittee and did tabling events such as this, because so many times in election sites and polls, we tend to see that there's a bigger turnout with older generations, and not as much when you see the younger generations. When you look at voter turnout rates, they tend to diminish with the younger groups such as Gen Z, which we are now. Because of this, I found it really important that peers were helping other peers become motivated with our civic duties and responsibilities. Through my actions, I was able to register a lot of my friends that were eligible to vote and encourage my friends who maybe weren't yet eligible to be motivated to get registered once they became of age. I just hope that my actions would help motivate my peers to take action civically and then lead to voting and create that as a habit as they're going along with their futures. I also not just only got involved with creating encouragement for my peers to get registered to vote, but also by working in elections myself and encouraging it for my peers as well. In my hometown, I found this nonprofit called Youth Do Vote, which helped students get involved with election processes through that organization. I worked with Heather Eichling, which provided me with numerous resources towards judges' contacts that I could reach out to find accessible polling sites near me. I ended up working at my high school and nearby elementary schools, so it was very accessible to me as a high school student to participate in. This is something that I wasn't even aware that I could participate in until my senior year of high school. As as most states allow student election clerks at the age of 16 years old, and you get paid for volunteering your time for helping participate in the democracies in America's democracy. And so through this, I was able to be directed to proper training to become an election clerk. However, for a lot of times clerks don't even need prior training, but it is highly recommended. So I would just encourage getting involved with your county elections department. Usually I would advocate for you calling versus emailing. Since it's a government department, they can tend to be a little bit slow with emails. So by either going in person or calling, you are guaranteed to receive a face-to-face conversation or on the phone call and get information about how you can get resources or training and direct you to certain sites that will be beneficial for you. So then spreading awareness. I also continue to work with a national nonprofit called Youth Turnup. Called Turn Up Youth Initiative, which was an initiative that was started by a student at Harvard University, and encouraged high schoolers to create voter registration events at their group, and they got paid to do so. So this was another event that provided me with numerous resources to start other voter registration campaigns on my campus. They provided me with voter registration forms, envelopes, and with stamps on it, as well as stickers and pens and clipboards, all in which I could use to help encourage and educate my fellow peers about registering to vote and participating in elections. So through this and these other organizations providing me with these resources to help me get involved, I began to realize more and more how important it was that I was participating in these groups and organizing these events when students were coming up to me telling me that they had no idea that they could register to vote before they were 18 years old. For example, in Texas, the voting laws is that you can register 2 months before your 18th birthday, and I created the slogan at my school, 1710 day, which because it was exactly 2 months before your 18th birthday. And I had other students as well who didn't know that in the state of Texas, you couldn't register to vote on the same day of elections. And so when I was even working at some of my election sites, I had to sadly turn away some young voters because they had either tried to register to vote that same day or maybe just a week prior. So sadly, they had to postpone their voting to the next election. Because of this, it proved to me that there is a lack of knowledge about voting going on, and there needs to be increased awareness to make sure that people in every state know what their voting laws are and how to navigate them properly and make sure that they are successful in voting and registering to vote as an eligible voter. Then recently, I also applied to the NSHSS scholarship, which I was grateful to become a scholarship recipient of. And through that, I was also then had the honor to be interviewed by the Texas Public Radio, in which they discuss my voter initiatives in high school. They took the quote from me that you wouldn't want your grandparents picking out your music. So why would you let them represent you? Oftentimes, Gen Z can be so passionate and motivated about these political issues. And you can see it time and time again on social media with different posts and and protests going on around the nation with Gen Z getting riled up about these political campaigns. However, Gen Z can't stop at just reposting on social media, but it needs to extend to voting and using that as a tangible action to make concrete change in the voting sites and then through who represents us. Just as you wouldn't want your grandparents or older generations to make decisions for our lives, we can't make them make decisions about who's going to represent us for the rest of our future when we're going forward. So overall, I just want to reiterate that your vote matters and your voice matters. And overall, just reiterating that voting is so crucial and is truly a fundamental part of our democracy that cannot be overlooked or forgotten. Oftentimes, Gen Z can be on the lower end when it comes to voter turnout, which is numbers that we want to turn around. So if we all remember how to be actively and civically engaged and to encourage our fellow peers to do the same, we can change the connotation that younger generations don't vote and flip the narrative to ensure that younger generations are also getting the proper representation needed in our government. Just want to thank y'all for listening. That I just really hope that y'all can be motivated to register to vote if your deadline's coming up soon, and just helping your friends and peers do the same if they haven't already. Thank you.
Come on,
Thanks,
you're up.
Oh, thanks, Eliana. That was great. I mean, I totally agree with you, the part about, voting and just the fact that so many young people simply don't know where to get started. And that's something I saw in my community too. So I took some similar initiatives. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. My project focused a little bit more on the policy aspect of voter registration and how young people can get involved early on. It's through the governmental frameworks that we have in this country. So hopefully by the end of my presentation, you guys will know, a little bit more about how you can get involved, not just in your community, but a little bit beyond that as well. So we can advocate for the change we wish to see on the national level. So when I applied for the NSHSS scholarship, I worked with my group, the Center for Voters Initiative in Action, and we focus on legislative issues surrounding youth engagement in government. So here's my slideshow. It's not as great as Eliana's because I just threw it together a few days ago. But since I was young, I've grown up here in Washington, D.C., and I've always been fascinated by democracy and voting as a mechanism for change. In the United States of America, the rights that we have to vote, we fought for them and we have them today, but so many people just simply look over them and we really don't see a high youth turnout. I think Eliana said it before, but I'll say it again. The Gen Z demographic is incredibly powerful in representing our voices and making sure that we have our voices heard on the national level. It's just a matter of harnessing our voice and knowing how to get involved with the voting process in the first place. So that's what I've hoped to do. As a young person, I was always interested in democracy. I wrote to President Obama when I was around 8 years old, and then President Trump when I was 12, and I got replies both times, so I was pretty happy. And I think that just being there and getting involved in government and knowing that someone was willing to listen really helped me out and really gave me that motivation I needed to get involved. So I've been fighting for a better tomorrow through voter registration and specifically creating policy frameworks so that young people have the ability to register to vote, or so that young people know that they have the resources they need to get involved. So I started out with my community, and like all of you guys, I'm sure that there might be just that one friend you have who doesn't know how to register to vote, or that one government class where they never really teach you anything. And I'd say that's the best place to get involved. Just get started in your local community with the people you know best in the town that you've grown up in. Maybe you just moved there, but still, Your town is often the best place to start. And the way national movements are created is by, every single city, one step at a time, all working together towards a common goal. So it takes a lot of young people working together in each of their communities to fight for this. When I started in my community, I was really concerned after January 6th, seeing all the instability that derived from it. Not really the political instability, but more so this instability of our democratic institutions and if voting would even be around in the next 5, 10 years. So I started getting involved with my friends. We lived relatively near to the Capitol. We were somehow in some way connected to January 6th. I remember I was getting a burger once, and the guy who's there, he was a police officer on January 6th, and he was just talking about it. So there are cool people that we meet in our area, but I'm sure there are some people in your community as well who are interested in this topic. But that's how I got involved. So watching it was surreal. I mean, seeing how the democratic institution was so fragile really concerned me. And that's why I wanted to get involved in my community. So I started, like Eliana, doing a voter registration drive. What I really recommend is reaching out to your local institution and partnering with them because they have so many resources that can help you out to get involved. When I started in my community, we only had a group of around 5 people as part of the Young Democrats Club. And from there, we just grew and grew because once we had a few people getting involved, then we just exponentially grew because more people want to get involved. If you're able to take initiative and be a leader yourself, plan the movements you wish to see, I think everyone will have success in doing that. So when we did our first voter registration drive, we only had around 5, 10 people. But then as we kept doing it, as we kept building our team, we kept on getting more and more turnout. Reaching out to your League of Women Voters, maybe if you're more right-leaning, Turning Point USA, or Voters of Tomorrow, if you're more left-leaning, there are various partisan political institutions. But at the end of the day, regardless of our political party, we all want the same thing. We want Americans to get registered to vote, to represent their views in government so that like Eliana said, it's not representative of our grandparents. We need to make sure that, our voice is being represented in government. So that's how I start on the local level. And then from there, there are also a lot of statewide institutions that you can get involved in. So I started getting involved in my chapter of High School Democrats and with my state party for the Democrats and Republicans. And we worked together to launch legislation that surrounded, voter registration. Did it pass? No. But that's the thing. I mean, not everything that we do in life is going to pass or fail. Sometimes we're going to make it and sometimes we're not. And I think that, accepting those struggles and building on what we've done before is incredibly important. So if you guys get started on a movement, just know it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of hard work, interacting with your friends, talking to your teachers, pushing against, boundaries that are already instilled. In a lot of communities, a lot of young people may want to get involved, but there simply aren't the legal frameworks. There's no person willing to listen. There's no position where a young person can get involved. There's no teacher to host a voter registration drive's room in. So that's what I set out to do. So in my federal bill, I launched a bill in Congress last year that focused on voter registration. It's called the High School Voter Empowerment Act, and it essentially designates high schools as voter registration agencies under US law. It was a bill from a few sessions of Congress ago, but it never really passed, and it had a few arbitrary words that we sort of got rid of. And from there, we just had our team email out to a bunch of random people, local representatives, state representatives, national representatives, people at the White House. And I think taking that initiative is so important because you never know where it's going to lead you. Last year, if you told me I was doing half the stuff I was doing today, I couldn't have imagined it. But when you really start doing something that you care about, and if voter registration and making a difference in your community is what you really feel calling for, then you should do it regardless of how many times people tell you no. I remember I was in a meeting in Capitol Hill once with the House Admin Committee, and we were discussing the bill. And of course, when you walk in, there's going to be people who look down on you as a young person, and they're going to say, "Well, aren't you the intern? Where's your superior?" And then you kind of have to explain that I'm the person who's here and I'm trying to do this bill in Congress. And then it takes you a few minutes, and then you have to go through and you sort of have to earn your seat at the table. It's not just given to you. And I think that's one thing that I really learned. You have to push for what you want and for what you believe in. And even then, with the House Admin Committee, they were bringing these constitutional challenges, these, legislative precedents, conflicts of state and federal government. And those are all valid concerns. But there are often times when people are just going to try to bring you down. It's important to keep your eyes set on the goal and keep pushing ahead, regardless of how many people tell you no. They said it would be impossible to introduce the bill. It'd be impossible for, this bill to even advance to the committee stage because of its fundamentally flawed language. Looking back, I just see the issues and the mistakes that we made, and we were able to fix them. Don't let the negative feedback affect you in a negative way. Use it to make yourself a better person and a better leader. And that's how we were able to get to the White House. We were working with the White House Office of the Vice President, the White House Domestic Policy Council, And these are people who are willing to help us advance our federal legislation. And because of that, we were able to draft a bill which reflected what pretty much everyone wanted that both parties could agree to, voter registration for all public high schools, but only on request. So no school would be mandated to have a voter registration drive, and no school would be totally left out of the process either. The federal support would be there regardless. And I think that's another part of what I wanted to tell you guys. Compromise is so important when you go into something. A lot of times there's going to be the Republican side or the Democrat side, or maybe the liberal side and the conservative side. As a young person, we already have enough going for us, enough coming at us because of our age. It's important that we stick together and, pursue the common goal, which a lot of times is just democratic stability. And I think focusing on that really helped me out. So my role in expanding youth engagement massively expanded after planning these meetings with Congress and the White House. And a lot of people, they just come up and ask me, how did you do it? And it's really just having a good team, having a good, group of friends, and being able to take the initiative and planning into your own hands. No one's going to hold your hand and walk you through it. As young people, we need to, put ourselves out there and do the outreach, even when people tell us no. And I think that's part of the reason I was able to succeed along with my friends, is because we kept putting ourselves out there no matter how many times we were told no. And it does pay off. We were able to meet with so many members of Congress. We were able to meet with people at the White House. We were able to advocate in movements. And the idea that there's a bill out there that could just change so many lives is incredibly meaningful to me. Last year, we didn't even have a bill. It was like a total draft. But then after putting a lot of time and effort into it, we were able to basically rejuvenate it and create a nationwide movement. We partnered with NAACP, Common Cause, um, and several other youth-led organizations, and we were able to introduce this bill. And the bill currently has 30 sponsors in the House and the Senate. And hopefully, when we get it past next Congress, because this Congress is coming to an end, we'll be able to have a nationwide program where every student and every school has the financial support they need to get registered to vote. A lot of us are in rural communities or areas that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, where even if we wanted to host a voter registration drive or getting involved, it's quite simply impossible because the system isn't set up to help us that way. So what my group does is we focus on changing the system through policy, less grassroots movement, but more working within the government and making sure that the legislative mechanisms allow young people to get involved. So I strongly urge you guys to do that. Voter registration is incredibly important, and it's the fundamental, backbone of our democracy. And I think policy is also incredibly important, making sure that people can register to vote. People do have access to those resources so that, each person can get involved. And that's the goal at the end of the day, to have your voice heard in government. So I'd say that you should also reach out to your local council, your mayor, your state council, your state legislature, and see where the areas are for you. Maybe there's a bill you're interested or an initiative you're willing to support. Go lobby with that group that's going out there. Go get involved in a federal initiative, because it's never too much to just say, I want to do this. If you have a goal, you work hard for it, and you have initiative, then I think anyone can do it. And I think that's one thing this bill really taught me. And moving on from that, another part of the voter registration thing was pursuing the vision globally, right? So I worked on the national level with, Congress and stuff like that. And Congress is relatively, when I first walked into Capitol Hill, I thought there'd be a lot of security and a lot of, background checks and stuff. Anyone can go lobby for a bill. Anyone can walk into a representative's office. I think the hardest part is just having the courage to knock on that door, present your vision, and put yourself out there. But once you do that, once you put yourself out there, you can continue to grow and grow and grow. So what our organization did was we focused on the national mechanisms for policy, and now we work on, global mechanisms for making sure that young people can get involved across the world. So we also work with the United Nations Human Rights Committee that's focused on achieving civic education mandates for lower or less economically developed and socially developed countries. So in our review of Somalia, for example, a big issue there is that young people are resorting to violence and terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab because they simply don't have the voter education they need early on to know how to make a positive change in government. And if you think about it, in the United States, we're not too different. A lot of young people simply don't know how to get involved. And as a result, we resort to spewing hate online. We get mad with the system, but we don't really know how to change it. And at the center of it all lies civic education. And with civic education, we're able to properly represent our views in government and have the open and meaningful dialogue that we need to enact change. So that's one thing my company focuses on, not just on the national level, but the global level. And one thing about this, I also thought the UN was incredibly restricted, but all of these organizations and systems in place, they're made to help people and they're made to represent people. And young people are undoubtedly and always will be an incredibly important demographic and an incredibly powerful demographic. So don't let that disadvantage you or dissuade you. Put yourself out there, use it to your advantage. There are certainly challenges that we encountered. I know I did, but if you keep pushing for it, I think you can achieve it. So that's the one thing we hope to focus on. Some of the mandates that we received from the United Nations Human Rights Committee, I won't really read all of it, but I do think that global leaders are starting to finally recognize the importance of civic education based on the contributions we inputted during the human rights reviews. The Human Rights Committee expert from France and Japan respectively declared, universal mandates for civic education should be the norm in respect to India and Somalia. So now we're working with the governments in those countries to help them implement these curriculums within their local schools. So we're starting out small on the local level, but then we're hoping to go big. So just to summarize, I mean, it's always going to be difficult. It has been difficult and it always will be. The issues that young people have faced throughout history are unprecedented. We've been looked down upon. We don't receive proper education at times, and a lot of people just disregard our voices. And even today in Congress, you see that there's so many people who just have a total disregard for the views of young people. And to that, I would say that there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. There will always be that generational divide, but how do we bridge the generational divide and get to a point where we all can represent our views and have an open forum for discussing change? I think that's what's incredibly important. So I just say get yourself out there, get involved, try to do whatever you want to do and take your own initiative, because at the end of the day, it's you who you're fighting for. It's your community, it's your people, and you shouldn't let anyone disadvantage you, especially because in my case, I would have never thought I would have made it here. But I did with the help of friends and a lot of other people. So put yourself out there, and I think it can really pay off.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'll do one last call for questions. There aren't any right now, but we'll do one last call for questions. And while we're waiting for any, I would just react to both of your presentations by saying what I really took away from both of you is when you bring these issues, these electoral and political issues down to a more local and a more personal level, they become so much more meaningful and so much more impactful and less toxic than when you encounter them on the national news or when you encounter them on social media, right? That they can be really rewarding and I think really an opportunity to improve people's lives, because there really is this undercurrent through all of this that we live in an incredible country, but people are going through a lot, and there's a lot of things that we can do to make the country better and to make people's lives better. And that's really what a lot of this can be about, shaping policy, registering voters. And I think people can get turned off from the process when they just experience it on their screens. And you guys have made a really wonderful case for getting involved on a more personal level and how meaningful that can be. So I don't think we've even got any questions. Are there any last words either of you would like to share? You did great. I don't think you have to add anything else. Well, I
No,
want to
thank you.
thank everybody for joining us. Hope people check out the recording. Thanks to everybody for having us, and have a great evening. Appreciate it.